Good morning, Grace.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm pretty good.
Excellent. Well, welcome to our listeners and today's episode of Can You See What I See? Vicky Scott here, and today my co-host Grace Hart and I want to talk about boundaries, including
Dun, 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 dun.
Yes, including whether they always serve us. Now, I know that sounds a little weird, but stay with us for that. But first, I just want to ask if any of our listeners were able to have some fun with the home play we suggested last week after our joy and laughter episode. Were you able to list 10 things that bring you joy? Sometimes I find that hard, but I don't know whether you noticed if you were able to receive that joy, even when you're in the face of upset. That's when the test happens, isn't it? Well, isn't it great?
Yeah, it's amazing how we have, thousands of responses to what's wrong and terrible and bad and, but when we say, let's write a list on what's joyful. I never thought about that. It's like, well, what would you like to create?
Yeah, I love that. It's always been a challenge. I have to admit that I find it challenging, but,
absolutely.
I start with good intentions. Yeah. Yeah, but at least I'm noticing it more. Before I was unconscious about what I was doing. Now I'm thinking, there I go again. So anyway, back to today's episode. Grace, what can you see about our world in relation to boundaries?
I see a world where we function from total awareness that we don't actually need to put up walls.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because even just you saying those words, putting up walls, has an energy about it that isn't as light as just setting healthy boundaries, isn't it?
Completely different. So you can be aware of what works for you and what doesn't, and that's fantastic. But if you turn that into a wall, like, what is it? Lord of the Rings, you shall not pass. What tends to happen is if you have a wall up on, say, aggressive people, you shall not pass. No aggressive people past this point. What happens is you can receive the good in that person, let them through because you don't want to see the negative. Like, I don't want to see that. Got a wall up. Don't want to see that. It doesn't stop you letting them in. And so it's really about choosing who to engage with and have experiences with versus on actually receiving all their information and not having any walls up to their good, their bad, and their ugly. So you can have an informed choice.
I like that. We've been sort of encouraged along in my generation for years. Well, just focus on the positive,
Yeah.
But it's an unreal expectation, and it actually leaves us like feeling like there's a bad taste in our mouth because we know there's still something there. It's like, hang on, there's a stench, but I can't quite name it here.
And that, my friend, right there is the invalidation of being. Because you've got the gut instinct, you've got the awareness saying there's something about this person. But because you've got the rightness of your point of view on we need to be nice to everyone, we need to see the good in everyone, and no matter what someone's been through, how terrible, we need to have understanding. And that's what perpetrators love.
Yeah, well, we've often known, I'll use the expression, if they knew better, they'd do better.
And that's not true.
It comes back to that where we keep saying, hang on, we're only responsible for ourselves. So why is it that we morph that boundary about them taking on responsibility and saying behaviours from other people that are totally inappropriate? We actually, just let them pass without any sort of, hang on, that wasn't okay for me when you said or did that.
Yeah, I think that we tend to react to people's, so for example, if someone's done something and they've had a bad childhood, okay, it's really good to acknowledge, that's what happened, that's why they are choosing what they're choosing. However, that doesn't excuse their choices, and you need to actually be aware of what you want to allow into your life. To me, it's about allowance, not acceptance. So it's like, I'm not going to accept your behavior, but I'm going to allow that information in that you had a bad childhood, and I'm going to allow that information of you're actually not willing to change. And so I've got that awareness, so therefore I'm not going to choose a relationship with you, for example. But what we tend to do is completely the opposite. We meet that person, we go, it's my job to fix them. I can do it. I'm the one that's qualified. He's chosen me because I have this sweetness and kindness that is going to make it all better. And it's not. It's a perpetrator's trick.
Mm. But, you mentioned perpetrators, but it doesn't only come with that sort of partner type, that can come from family members or from friendships or work colleagues.
Yeah, perpetration is the act. And that, your babysitter can perpetrate on you. Your teacher can perpetrate on you. Perpetration's a choice. And I know when we talk about a label like they're a perpetrator or they're an abuser, but anyone at any time, even the quote-unquote nicest people in the world, can have moments of where they perpetrate on you. And you've just got to be in allowing that information so you have the choice to make it, whatever steps, etc., that's going to keep you safe or help you create or whatever it is.
We've probably all been perpetrators of it at some point in our lives. I think it's unrealistic. If you're human, then you've probably done it at some point to somebody, thinking that, and now I recognise it's probably as a result of our own unresolved, I have to say it's people sort of think it's a new word, but it's a word that's been around for a long time and it needs to be understood more, and it's the word trauma. And often it's unresolved trauma, in each of us that causes us to say those things that are really not kind as well to others. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's when we're not in the center of our flower, right? When we're in the center of our flower, we know we have an absolute connection to our, clear knowing, our awareness, our very being, and we can see, that person's, they've gone through a hard time, but actually the way they're behaving is inappropriate and I'm not choosing to hire them or, whatever it is that, they've shown up in your life for. But one of the things I've noticed is after what you said, it triggered it. There's consciousness and there's anti-consciousness and there's unconscious. So I agree. We've all perpetrated and usually it's unconscious. We're buying a lie that we need to care for that person. We need to show them what, they can't see and, we're trying to do the right thing. And so that's the unconscious when we haven't asked the question, can they receive it? Is this actually even required for me to, offer that advice or whatever it is? So that's the unconscious, when we're unconscious perpetration. But then there's, like you said, when you know better, you do better. That's not always the case. I'm the same in that when I know better, I do better. I make that choice. However, a lot of people will just be kind of blasé about it. And so I know when I drink, I'm not the best person in the room, or, I know that, I've got an anger problem, but it's not every day. And so they have already got the awareness, the consciousness that their action or choice is affecting themselves and other people, their work environment, their family, but they're still choosing to abuse or, drink or whatever it is that's happening. And so that's when it goes into the anti-conscious. So you already know what to do, but you're actually not doing anything about it. So that's more an anti-conscious. And then conscious, of course, is, I've just got this awareness, Vic. If you tried this, it's got, so much more could happen. But before I do that, I'm asking, hey, is it actually required for me to say this to her? Oh, it's not. Okay, I won't. Rather than autopilot of just because I've got an awareness doesn't mean I'm meant to share it, right?
Now there's the joy of wisdom.
Yes.
So Grace, if I could just go back to Cloud and Townsend wrote a book about boundaries, and it's one that's used a lot in giving people an idea of what healthy boundaries are actually all about across all areas of our life. And even now, I think the updated one has a section on digital boundaries. So, in this world of that we live in, how do you set those boundaries for yourself? But I grew up in a large family, and somehow I seem to make it mean that I personally didn't have any boundaries, and it was just my job to fit in and to suck things up and to get on with it. But after I read that book, I saw that I had actually got the messages mixed up, and it was my perception of what was required. And finally I came to accept that, well, I matter too, and that it wasn't selfish to have a view that I didn't like something and I could express it, or to say out loud to someone that their behaviour was inappropriate. Slow learner, hey?
Hey, not slow learner. Quit that.
Oops, take that one back.
Yeah. Yeah, look, one of the things, hindsight's a great thing, and so is, age as we grow older. But no, definitely. I think that with boundaries, it's not something that I was taught. I very much like you was the people pleaser and the peacemaker, and it was my job to make everyone laugh. And it's funny, because when you step into that, generally people don't receive it. When you're actually being that people pleaser, etc. I'm probably going to lose people when I say that, but it's like when you're not being you, you're not really fully received. And when you're not being you, you do open yourself up to a lot of judgment as well. So, but boundaries, yeah, I really get. What do you think? What do you think about what's possible now for you with boundaries?
Well, it's actually given me a lot more confidence to know and trust that gut of mine, I guess, because often when I was doing the other, it didn't feel good for me. So I tended to override my gut and think, oh, hang on, I'm not the only one here. There's 9 of us here, and we've da-da-da. So you can tend to excuse, but there's no, and I know my dad, he sort of had a lot of probably trauma, now that I know about trauma, in his early life. And when he got married and had us, he always had that thing about he was going to put a fence around us and protect us. And he did. But, you can see how his intention for that, whilst that worked for him, it didn't necessarily work for the rest of us, because we did tend to, in some of us, including me, would shut out all the joy and the gifts of the outside world because maybe it wasn't safe. It was only safe inside the fence. Or
you've just brought up something that's so important. When you put up walls instead of boundaries, that wall separates all the good coming to you as well, and it also separates your greatness being perceived and received by other people.
Say some more about that.
Well, when you imagine right now there's a wall between you and I. And so let's say, I've got capacities to care for you and generate and create with you. But if there's a wall between us, can you receive me, my gifts, talents and abilities? Could you hire me? Could you, create with me? And it's no, right? And
absolutely.
Also, same round the other way. You're this beautiful woman that, I know from experience, my life is greater from you, your love, your kindness, your care, your wisdom, all of that. But if there's a wall between us, can I receive that? So it actually, that wall, yes, you set it up to protect you, or for example, your dad sort of put that around you. And yeah, it stops the humanity. It stops the engagement. And, when you talked about trauma and you used the word perception, I really wanted to add in, it's interesting. 2 people can have a traumatic experience, but it's the perception of the trauma that actually creates that ongoing effect in your body. So it's how you perceive the world around us and the good, the bad and the ugly that can actually create walls versus just being an allowance of receiving the good, the bad and the ugly. And when I say receiving, I mean receiving the information, so you have total choice on who to have in your universe and who not to. But you don't actually need these physical walls up. In actual fact, doing that is an unkindness to you and the world, because you're shutting yourself out, and also you're not able to receive the love and kindness and care that is out there for you. Yeah.
And there's my favourite question. So what are we here for in life, eh? If not to experience all of it, all of us, and to, yeah. Cloud and Townsend, they asked some questions because they said that, loving and giving people, we tend to focus so much on, some of us, on being loving and giving that we forget our own limits.
Yeah.
And they said that, just ask yourself a few questions. And one of them was, can I say no and still be a loving person? What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, someone asking that question, what a sweetness, to even ask that. And what do you get? What do you get with that?
Well, yeah, I think it probably, for me, brings back to that the people pleaser thing.
Yeah, the fawning.
Yeah, because why do we make it mean that we're not a loving person if we say no? Otherwise, if we say yes, it's I know sometimes the hardest word, but sometimes it's easier to say yes because you don't have to deal with the impact of other people's responses to you.
Yeah, for me, it's when you are traumatized or when you've got trauma in the body, these are the sort of questions you ask yourself. And really, where I come from now is if you're in the center of the flower and it's a no, it's a no, and there's just this space around it. There's not this. It's a no. Oh, but I don't want to upset them, or it's a no on. Oh, how do I tell them so I don't lose my job, or I don't. And these are all the petals. These are all the disassociated parts that want to keep you in those walls. And what we actually find is that when we say no without any point of view, without any need to justify or defend or all of that, it's clean. And if they have a problem with it, that's their problem. And but if you struggle with that, it's because you're functioning from parts, not from your center of the flower.
Oh, that makes so much sense to me. It was funny this morning even. I was at the beach and introduced a friend who I haven't known for very long. But as I introduced her to this fellow, I said, oh, she's wonderful. We have a great friendship where we're going to the shopping centre. We will just call each other and say, are you here? You're free for a cuppa. And it's either yes or no. And when you just said there's a space around it, I thought that's another way of saying, and what this man said was, oh, it's nice to have low, what do they call it, when somebody's a low maintenance friend.
Yes. Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. I've got a girlfriend that I talk to very often, and we love the fact you're like, are you free tomorrow night? No. It's not like, oh no, because I have this and I could, but no, it's just no. And it's not insulting. It's just because she knows that if I was free, of course I'd want to see her. Right?
Yeah.
So she doesn't need to know all that stuff. And but we recognize that we can't function that way outside. And that's why you do have to read the room, because somebody may need to hear, but as long as you're not doing it from one of the things I studied was the child of consciousness, where we're making a judgment on someone like they can't receive it. I need to make them feel good, etc. And you've got to really watch that you're not actually labeling them and allowing them to be uncomfortable. And if I said to my girlfriend, they're an adult. If they want to know why, they can ask. We don't need to go into the reason and justification.
Part of this is some of us being taught whole different vocabulary. We've talked about this before, about, we do need to be responsible for meeting, first of all, identifying our own needs and then finding ways to have those needs met. And others aren't responsible for having our needs met. And, it reminded me of a lovely story I remember with our daughter. She's been raising her kids with trying to teach them this vocabulary for identifying their own needs. So when they're upset and crying, she quietly asks them, well, what do you need? And sometimes they go off into the story about what's happened and who did what and what they think is wrong. And then so she just keeps saying, yes, I understand that, but what do you need? And once I witnessed, it was about 6 or 7 at the time, and he said, I'm hot and thirsty. And I thought, oh, my hat, I would never have seen that one coming. I thought it was complaining about another child. And I thought, wow, that's wonderful that he gets to what his need is and how that is then playing out and impacting on his play with his friends. Nothing to do with his friends.
I just love that. I just absolutely love that. And the way, because I'm all about energies, and what you were just talking about was the energy of needy and the energy of need. And they're very different energies. And, we need oxygen. We need a key to, we don't need a key to start a car anymore, but we need to have access to a key to start a car. We need food to keep going. We need water. But then there's the needy, and the story is the needy, where it's the neediness is like, I just want the attention, something's wrong, I don't know what's happening. It's all that petal stuff is needy. And so what she did so beautifully is by asking that question, she's taken that child from a petal to the center of the flower. And then when the child went to the center of the flower, he got the information on what he needed, and what he needed was some water or a drink. So, and one of the most powerful ways you can get somebody who's in the primal brain or the survival brain into the front part of their brain, the smart brain, is asking a question. So that's brilliant. Bravo to that person.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's actually how we play into things like manipulation. Because if we feel, if somebody's being needy, if we don't understand the difference between being needy and what our need is, then, for instance, if I just want a quiet night at home and somebody says, are you free tonight?
Yeah.
Well, in my world, I'd be saying, well, yes, I'm not going out, but no, I actually want some time to myself.
Yeah.
We don't think it's okay to say that out loud. It's like, oh, well, hang on, somebody's low or somebody needs something, and it's like we forget that we matter too.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things I learnt from my counsellor, and I have shared it on numerous times, is the parrot phrase. Have you heard about that? It's brilliant for people who are, let's just say pushy or whatever. So, and I'm not suggesting the person that asked you out is that. I just triggered this. And it's basically, if you say to me, hey, Grace, do you want to go out tonight? And so your parrot phrase might be, I'd love to, but not tonight, thank you. Right? And so that's it. And then they come back, oh, come on, are you doing anything? Like, if you're not doing anything, come on, don't you want to see me? Like, is something wrong? Then you say the same thing. You go, but you say, as I've just said. So you just go, as I've just said, thank you so much, but no, I'm choosing to stay home tonight. And you stop. And then if they push for the third time, and truly, if they push for the third time, that's really an abusive person. And so then you say, as I've just said twice, thank you so much, but I'm staying home tonight. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Otherwise, I'm going to get going. So that's the parrot phrase. You say once, you say, as I've said, second, And I saw an interview with Taylor Swift, where this interviewer was just pushing her and pushing her and pushing her. And she did the parrot phrase in her own way. It was more organic, but it was a parrot phrase 100%. She's been taught it. And it's a brilliant way, because what we tend to do is when we feel wrong for saying no, and that's when you're on a pedal, because you're buying a lie that you should be doing what they want and not what's true for you, right? And that's never true. It's definitely coming from a pedal, right? Or a disassociated part. And so when you say that first parrot phrase, if you've got an issue with that, or you feel mean because you're not saying because, I would definitely be doing some trauma work because, and especially when you go on the second and third stage of the parrot phrase, I know when I first learnt it, I felt so mean to not give that extra information. But really, abusers, they want that extra information so they can come back at you. So if you had said, I'm not doing anything, but I just really feel like being alone, they will use that. You're not doing anything, so you don't want to be with me.
Mm.
And it's like, no.
I actually found that hard. I remember when our kids were young and at school too, I couldn't work out why, one of them would say yes, he'd go out with his mates, but then wouldn't show up. Finally, that's what it would come to. And one day when I said, well, why don't you just say that you don't want to go? And said, because they won't take that for an answer.
Yeah.
And he said, it's just easier if I say I'm coming and not going. And I thought, wow, it's we'll still, it's just an issue, isn't it, for both parties then? Because where does this line of trust, one in about knowing you got your own back, and then the other is saying, hang on, I matter too, and I make a different choice, and somebody else accepting that, being a low maintenance friend, I guess you might say.
Well, I think that we aren't willing to have vulnerable conversations, and also being willing to look at a situation and recognize, okay, it's not safe for me to be vulnerable with that person. So it might have been true that he's recognized that these people aren't going to take no for an answer, but it could also be one of his pedals just going, this is the easy way out. So I do see a world in where, it's good to ask questions on, is that actually true that they can't receive it, or is it just that you're uncomfortable to have that conversation? And this, so this is where we need to look at self and what we're choosing and what it's generating and creating. Because a lot of times what we think isn't actually what's going on. And a lot of times when you think that you can't have a vulnerable conversation with someone, it's actually not true. So, but you need to be aware, because if they're abusive people, well, then that's a whole other thing. It's like, well, why am I choosing to engage with them in any way? And for me, it's a really red flag that if you can't be all of you with a friend or whoever, it's a red flag saying there's something there. And that something there could just be that you've got a disassociated part that needs integration, or it might be that this person's actually, your warning bells are going off that this person is not able to receive all of me. I can't speak freely in front of this person, and that's okay, because sometimes it is about, okay, I can't have this vulnerable conversation. So what is going to create the best? And sometimes it can look like exactly what he did. He might be spot on. That might have been the best choice for him. You don't know until you ask the questions.
I love what you say about the vulnerability. That's Brené Brown's 30-odd years of research around vulnerability and shame. And I heard her talking, she was talking with Oprah on something I was watching the other day, and she talked a little bit about, I think it was, when she ever worried about disappointing someone, and I think Oprah responded something like, well, you cannot live a brave life without disappointing someone. So and this is where the boundaries come in about, well, hang on, what do you want? And developing a vocabulary that allows you to express your need, because that's not something people of my generation, we didn't know much about needs and emotions and things. It was like, well, suck it up and get on with it. And the other thing was, if you started to say something that didn't sound nice or kind or something, then you were airing your dirty washing. And somewhere in there, to me, people have missed, there is a balance between just whinging and whining about something or having the courage to have that vulnerable conversation.
Yeah, it's very similar to that needy versus need energy. There are people who can tell a story, like I'll talk about my domestic violence, but I'm not talking about it from a dysfunctional or needy or it doesn't have stickiness around it. It's just like, yep, this is what happened and this is what I'm choosing, et cetera, et cetera. And I think people notice the difference. And so when you talk vulnerability isn't spewing your story out to somebody. Vulnerability is, hey, when you said this came up for me and I'd like to change it. It's got a cleanness and a spaciousness around it, and it never, ever has a connection to wrongness or, right and wrong. And this is what I'm super passionate about. It's like, for every problem that you have, look at what you can create versus how do I prove that I'm right? Or how do I make them wrong? Or how do I get them to see that I'm right? These are all ways that we just automatically choose rather than, okay, there's an issue here. So what can be created between the two of us? It doesn't matter who's right and wrong, because guaranteed they're going to feel right about whatever it is and you're feeling right about whatever it is, and so that's not where we want to focus. We want to be vulnerable and say, hey, there's stuff here, right? And it's like, yeah, okay, so what can we create? And that's, it does take, it takes vulnerability on both sides to keep steering away from the defending, the, justifying the right and the wrong, and look at, is it possible to create something here?
That's been my experience, when I've actually, in the work I've done with Wendy Watego with Stars Institute of Learning and Leadership, there have been so many times when it's been through those vulnerable times that something magical happens on the other side of it, but it's like walking through fire at the time. So, and I really get, probably it's been part of that self-healing thing as well, because, I've wanted to defend and justify and do everything, but when I actually stopped and listened, and often listened to what was happening for somebody else, it opened up a completely different conversation.
You know what? Thank you so much for saying that, because that's what we do. We like to conclude. So, they're this, whether it's they're unkind, they're lazy, they're whatever you've, and look, it might be, quote unquote true. You might have had experience or proof of that. However, that is not necessarily what's going on. They might be tired because they've got a sick kid, or they can't make their mortgage payments, or they've just lost a person with COVID, through COVID. You don't know. And the minute you kind of go, they are this, and I definitely did that when I left my husband's. I was married twice, and I was really conscious of that. I was really conscious of not labeling, because there was something or lots of things that you loved about that person. And so it's super important not to say, oh, they're angry. So yes, at times you could say they choose anger or whatever it is, but it's super important to be in awareness of what's going on. And of course, as I said, it's not making an excuse. If you've got an employee who's continually late or not making deadlines or whatever it is, instead of saying that they're hopeless or they're not following through or they're lazy or whatever, maybe ask the question, what else could it be, and talk to them. Just say, hey, I've just noticed you've been, running late a few times this week. Are you okay? Let's talk. But that's the thing that, I'm passionate about: safe, secure and supported. They're my things. And, if you're in a culture where you can't ask that question or because they don't feel safe enough to say, my car's broken down and I can't find another one and the bus ran late, or, whatever it is, if they don't feel like they can do that, then, that's the culture, that's the problem. It's not the person necessarily.
Well, it's sometimes it's the culture, certainly, but a lot of our systems have been set up to not
correct
reflect that as well. So you get a culture within a system that, sometimes it was set up a long time ago, and it's just not serving us anymore. So it is really time that we do start to become more conscious of the language we use for everything, isn't it?
Yeah, that's that turkey joke that I told you. Oh, just lots of
Tell me again.
It was a generational thing. It was basically
oh yes, the grand it came down the line where they cut it off and just to fit in the oven.
they cut off the last third of the turkey, and then the mum did that, and then the next generation, she said, why do you cut and throw away the bottom part of the turkey? And she says, oh well, mum did it and grandma did it. And then the story was that that was because they had a really tiny oven and the turkeys didn't fit in there, and they never threw away the last third. Yeah. They actually just cooked it separately. And so there was this whole 2 generations that were throwing away the third of the turkey because that's what mum and gran did, So let's look at changing this. It might not happen in our lifetime, but geez, that's the world I see.
Oh, I love that. And, Cloud and Townsend went on to write a book, Boundaries for Kids, as well. So I'll put those names
Fantastic.
up after this. And they give such great examples of situations. And, and when I read it for myself, I thought, oh, my hat, I never said that out loud, but here it is in black and white. So it's not just me experiencing this.
No,
So,
yeah,
I found it. So just to summarise then, I guess what I'm hearing is there are probably maybe more, but 3 different sorts of boundaries we can have. One is to
you shall not pass wall.
Well, let me say it in my language, and you can say it. One is about getting our own needs met. Then the second one is, are they really your needs, or are you putting up a wall for something? Yeah. And the third one is this thing of energetic boundaries. So can you say some more about, I remember you talking about that to me before this podcast, about just the energy of, say, gratitude or something. Can you say some more about that?
Well,
talking about the boundaries in relation to that.
Yeah. Well, as you know, my thing is energetic self-defense. And so I really love people to get to know the different energies. And so if I said, get the energy of gratitude, you know what it feels like. When you're grateful or someone is grateful for you, there's an energy there. And same thing with, whether it's sadness or judgment, there's an energy there. And so if you get to know, rather than get to know the people as such, it's more about what energies, if you imagine that they were a supermarket of their own and they were walking towards you, what energies should they have in the supermarket, and be willing to receive the good, the bad and the ugly, so you can have total choice. So that's more, for me, what energetic self-defense is.
I like that, because it always makes things a choice, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you're not actually putting up a wall to it. You're willing to be an allowance, like, oh, okay, that person's choosing drugs, or that person's choosing aggression, and they might also choose happiness and joy, but you've got to be aware of, if I create with that person, or if I, allow that person into my home or my heart or whatever it is, what's it going to generate and create? And you'll have the awareness, you'll have the energetic awareness of, no, it's actually going to be, hurtful down the track, or it's not going to work out okay. You would know that in an instant if you're willing to be an allowance, allow yourself to receive all that information about them.
This is a fine line for me around, I remember a relative of mine sharing about her mum had a cousin, and they'd both passed away now many years ago, but she was saying that there was a fallout in the family, and somebody had obviously stepped on somebody's toes, and the boundaries were established. And
the wall was established.
well, you can hear the energy of that one, can't you? Because they didn't speak for 40 years. Now, fortunately for them, they were both still alive, and they did reconnect.
Right.
But neither of them could remember what they fell out about. And to me, that really reeks of the walls thing, doesn't it? Rather than a healthy boundary of, So and that's where I think developing the language, and especially around the language of energetic self-defense, as you write about, that's a new vocabulary. Wow, I wish, because that can actually protect us physically as well.
It's the only protection you need. Awareness of energies is truly the only, quote unquote, boundaries that you need.
Oh, interesting.
And when you change the energy, you change your life. And and if it is, for example, a perpetrator coming to you, you would be an allowance. In other words, you've allowed the energy, you've recognized, oh, they're a perpetrator or they're violent or whatever. And so you see them. And when you see them, perpetrators don't like being seen, or their energy's been named. So instantly in that moment, they're not going to choose you. So it's just a beautiful way. And likewise, someone beautiful and delicious and creative, and there's a match, and they look at you, and it's like, you've got this energy of, let's do this, let's change the world, and then it's like zing, zing, zing. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to navigate, I guess, on what you're going to create and who to create with, and and staying in that center of the flower. Hey, well, what do you think for home? I was going to say homework, but home play. What do you think we should do?
Well, I think maybe just have a conscious look at whether the boundaries that you think you've set up are still serving you, for a start.
Oh, good one.
And to see whether they're a wall or whether you just want to be more right than the other person.
Yes.
But the other thing that I think is important too is, and I'll put this link up as well, about discover your true self. And it's that thing you talk about, coming back to your beingness in the centre of the flower, Grace, because sometimes what can happen when we've experienced some trauma is that we do have a dissociative part and we've disconnected from our true self. So I'll put up a short YouTube video link for that. But maybe it's a missed opportunity to heal ourselves and reconnect with our true self. I definitely
feel that way. And I love that home play that you've done, because, you know, what can happen is we like to conclude they are this, and then we put up a wall, and sometimes they change. And if you've got that wall up and you've got the conclusion that that's who they are, instead of actually being an allowance of being able to receive, oh yeah, they're still the same, or oh my goodness, no, there's been a big shift, and maybe there is someone I want to connect with now, or so I love that. So I'm going to be doing that this week, looking at if I've got any walls up.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. All right. Well, thank you very much, Grace, for sharing your wisdom today, and I look forward to hearing what our listeners think could create greater in our world in a time when we sure do need it.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for your feedback, guys. And again, if there's anything that you would like us to talk about, please do get in contact on choosinggreater.com. Have a lovely week, and I'll say goodbye from me. Vic, are you cool?
And for me too.
Okay, take care, guys. Bye.